Good afternoon, YouTube. This is the Oracle coming in for another edition of my video log on being an ex-Jehovah Witness and advocating for people to free their mind and also to hear humanistic stories about survival and enlightenment. This is a subject that is a long time coming for me. I finally had some time on this windy afternoon to talk about some things that have been on my mind for a while. I've actually, as I've shared in some of my previous videos, that when I first left the Jehovah Witness community over 25 years ago, I really didn't have a lot of association or interaction with the group. I needed to kind of do a clean break. I wanted to free myself from being around this mind controlling cult and just be free to be myself, to figure things out, to, get married, have, that kind of stuff. Like, I just wanted to live. I started getting back into what was going on in the Jehovah Witness community because my grandfather had passed away and I went to his funeral, and a lot of things happened that caused me to kind of ask the question, what is going on with Jehovah Witnesses? I found a forum, and when I went on this forum, I actually started researching a lot of things, came across crisis of consciousness, talked to people that were anonymous on this board, that were in Bethel and were giving information, so much information that I was astounded because I had been a member and I had, been baptized, and I realized that there was so much about this religion that I had no idea about. As I stated before in many of my other videos, the Leah Remy documentary or docudrama or docu-series on Scientology really resonated with me because I see so many similarities between the Jehovah Witness religion and Scientology. But today's subject is probably the hardest hitting one that I've done. And it's a subject that I've wanted to talk about for a while, and that is the governing body. For people that have never been on my channel before, I'm anonymous simply because of the fact that I have a high profile career, and because of that I simply can't show my face because it would affect me in terms of my profession. However, I'm very fairly educated. I've been able to travel and talk to people from all walks of life. I've studied world religion. I've published things. So I've actually gone much further than I ever thought that I would when I first left this cult. And I guess I did it because I loved reading and I love knowledge and I love school. I think I would be a professional student if I could. I'm always trying to learn more about life and just acquire knowledge. But one of the things that prompted me to do this video was some of the things that I see now, which are very shocking to me. It was shocking to me to see that the Jehovah Witnesses actually had a website, because when I was leaving the religion and the internet was starting, there was a lot of talk that to avoid the internet. So it was really interesting to me to see that they actually embraced that, and they actually now have a website, and they now actually have the governing body that actually does videos to the rest of the organization. But there's so much mystery behind the governing body. There's so much that I see even now, because as I watch some of their videos, and there's only so much that I can actually watch because there's so many alarm bells that go off inside of my head whenever I see someone from the governing body talking, that I really get concerned, because even when I was a member, the governing body really wasn't what it is today. I see them much more involved. I see much more of their persona. I see much more of their control over the organization that concerns me. I see a lot of cult leadership type behavior. And if you know anything about cults and you know anything about cult leaders, it's this unwavering demand for obedience. And without questioning leadership, without asking any questions about what they're saying, and that the authority of the governing body and the authority of the Watchtower and Tract Society over the rank and file members gives me a lot of concern. And that's really the motivation I have for doing this video. If I cause one person to have a light bulb go off in their head, I'm glad. I'm happy. So without going any further, there are some resources that I have to mention for this particular video. And I'm not one that's heavy on resources because I really try to come from a humanistic point of view. But for this one, I definitely needed to do some research, and I needed to make some statements to everyone that was watching. The first person I want to thank is my partner. He's an educator, but as I was discussing the video just this morning, because we both had the day off, you know, he really gave me a lot of insight on some of the things that people might want to hear. And so I have to thank him for causing me to dig a little deeper and actually get some more research that I could contribute to this particular video. The other two places that I want to reference is JW Facts. They were able to help me out quite a bit with some of the things that I wanted to reference. I also want to reference a great book, which is 30 Years of Watchtower Slave. I love the comments that I get, and I read them all. And there was someone who had commented on a video that I had and told me I should get this book. And I'm really glad I did. I went on vacation to Vegas, and I took the book and was reading it on the plane. And I thought I knew as much as I could know about this actual religion that I've been a part of. I'm a third generation Jehovah Witness. Not anymore, but you know, I was born into this. My parents were born into this, and my grandparents were converted when they were fairly young. So I thought I knew everything about this religion, like the basics, the foundation, but actually reading 30 Years of the Watchtower Slave actually gave me a little bit more insight into this organization. And I'm so glad for people that are fearless enough to take away the veil and talk about how this organization came to be. And the reason that I talk about the 30 Years Watchtower Slave is that's actually where I'm going to start this conversation. My video today is entitled Why the Jehovah Witness Governing Body is an Example of Dangerous Cult Leadership. But let's go back to the beginning of this religion. And you can watch my New Light video, because one of the things that I criticize about this religion is that they don't want you to actually go back to the foundations of this organization. But they do that with every other group because they want to criticize it and say, don't just look at what it is that they're practicing. You need to understand the foundation of what this group is about. They're great at analogies. They use houses and you know, all types of things about foundation. And I agree. I feel like a house that's built on bad foundation is not going to stand. You don't want to put your house on sand. You don't want to put your house, and it hasn't been, the foundation hasn't been poured. So you actually, when you're having issues with the house falling apart, you want to actually go and look back at the foundation that it's built upon. And that's where I'm going with this actual organization. If you want to see why there has been a falling off of members, and you want to see why there is such a huge ExJW community, you only need to go back to the foundation. So from the book 30 Years a Watchtower Slave, the author talks about how he actually started in another country. And back then it was the Bible students. And so when this organization first started, it wasn't an organization. It was a group of people that actually got together and used to study the Bible. And when it became incorporated, and this is an important part that I want people to realize, the Watchtower and Tract Society today is a corporation, and it was incorporated. The date is in the 1800s. The late 1800s is when this became a corporation. And when it became a corporation and they had a president and a board of directors, there was actually a split. So before it became incorporated, people actually used to become members based on their spirituality, their devotion to actually being in the actual religion and voting. So the members actually had something to do with who became an elder, who became a ministerial servant, and that type of thing. I mean, they weren't exactly what they are at present day, but it was basically the same idea. So when things changed and it became incorporated and it had a president and a board of directors, that's when you started getting into the foundations of the governing body. So they used the term loosely, but it really was the board of directors that was the governing body. So what is the governing body? What do they do? So they believe that they are governed by the Holy Spirit, and they believe that they are the spokespeople for God. Now, I'm hitting hard, and I'm not making any apologies for it. So they call God Jehovah. Now, Jehovah is not God's name, and they've admitted that. It is the name that they've used. A Jesuit priest in the 1500s decided that was a name that they were going to use. So Jehovah is just a name that they're using because it's common, and people realize that when you say Jehovah, you're talking about the Most High, but that's really not God's name. So it's really interesting. I don't want to spend a lot of time on the hypocrisy and the flip-flopping that even people in the governing body have done. But let's be clear. They are, or they say they are, so there's the self-proclaimed spokespeople for God. So what else do we know about the governing body? So it was in 1971 that they said that they were actually separate from the board of directors. Now we're kind of getting into my age group, so I actually can remember some of the things that I'm going to talk about as we get further. Because again, I'm like, the governing body has actually changed since I was young, since I was very young. They've actually taken on a much sort of a different tone over the years. They certainly were not what they are today. So 1976 is when the Watchtower made the distinction that the governing body was basically different from the board of directors, although they were initially the same until 2000. So we're really talking about a board of directors and a presidency, and then the presidency was eliminated, and the governing body was the central group that was governing the Jehovah's Witnesses. Now let's be clear. that there's still a business part of the Jehovah Witnesses that exists that's separate from what I'm talking about today. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that. I'm just saying that there's also another group of people that actually lead the business part of the Jehovah Witnesses. So they further try to make a distinction, and they have a corporate directors and all the things that they do. I've seen some wonderful videos on, because when you're incorporated and you have a board of directors, you actually have to do an annual report every year. And so they try to make it something theological and something religious, but they actually have to, by letter of the law, have a meeting with the people that are on the board of directors, and they have to talk about what they have actually done. But they made this separate, so the governing body is no longer the board of directors 100%. Most of them were in the governing body, but after 2000, the governing body became more of just this entity, this spiritual entity that they were the self-proclaimed, and I'm going to go a little bit further with that, rulers of the Jehovah Witnesses. So I had some questions about the governing body as I started watching these videos, and sometimes I do come across a Jehovah Witness, even though, like I said, I haven't been in a religion for over 25 years, and I'm disfellowship. I don't care about labels. You can call me disfellowship, an apostate, whatever you want. I'm not any of those things. I'm a free person who thinks for themselves. I was born into a cult that was against my will. When I was 17 years old, I got out of it. When I realized how harmful it is to certain groups of people, I decided to be an advocate for freeing people and for even enlightening people to what they hide from you. So what are the qualifications to be a governing body member? Like what do they have to do? They have to go to college? Like, is there a test for it? Like how do they become that? So I did some research. Here are the qualifications for being a member of the governing body. You have to be a member of Bethel for a period of time. And so in another one of my videos, I kind of talked about how this became a service organization. So this organization is based on service, meaning free labor and free service. So it's kind of a stepping stone. And again, if you read 30 Years of Watchtower Slave, it talks about how there was a segment of the Bible students that actually left the organization when it became an organization, and Rutherford decided that in order for you to even be an associate member, you had to do a certain number of hours. And so everything that you become in this organization and this cult is attached to how much free labor, free selling you have to do. So it's ingrained in you that faith without works is dead, which is faulty. But they use that to indoctrinate their members that you can't just come to the Kingdom Hall and you can't just have something in your heart that says that you want to serve Jehovah. You actually can't do anything. You can't become a ministerial servant. You can't become an elder unless you're doing a certain number of hours in the field, thus field service. So you have to actually sell their publications. So in order to be a governing body member, you actually have to have spent a lot of your time in the field service work to even move up the ranks. So you have to be a regular pioneer, you have to have been a ministerial servant, an elder, and then you had to have applied to Bethel. And so how is it that they decide who goes to Bethel? It's based on the members have nothing to do with it. The members of this organization have nothing to do with who goes to Bethel or not. Here's what they do. They look at your Drum roll, service record. How many hours and how long have you been going out in the field selling the publications? And again, you can't have any type of membership. You can't become any if you're a male, because it's a male based governing body. So you can't be a woman. And again, I've talked about this in other videos, that it's a sexist, misogynistic group. But you can't be a female. You have to have given hundreds of thousands of hours of free labor, and you have to apply to Bethel. So here's some things that I found out in my research. So when you go to Bethel, you take an oath of poverty. I don't think a lot of people realize that. And I talked about this in another video, but I've actually had some information passed to me from other people that have been to Bethel. See, I've already talked about the fact that you don't get paid when you go to Bethel. You don't get a W-2. You don't get health insurance. You don't get a 401k. You don't get a pension. And then you have to take a vow of poverty. So let's do a comparison very quickly to Scientology, because the Bethel is the comparative to the Sea Org. And they have to sign $1 billion contract. Well, you have to sign a contract when you go to Bethel. You have to sign a contract of poverty so that they don't have to pay you. They just give you a place to live and they give you food. And like I said before, they give you a place to live and they give you food in prison. They're not paying you. You're supposed to devote all your time to serving them, for getting free labor from them so that they can become billionaires. So you do all that and you get a little bit of money for your toiletries, which is probably like, I think it was $49 or $59 a week or every 2 weeks, which is nothing. But this is what these governing body people do. So once they go to Bethel, they take their vow of poverty like everybody else there, and they continue to move up the ranks. And it's very political. But again, where's the education? None. There's a few members of the governing body that did not even graduate from high school. And I'm bringing this up because I want to make a bigger point to people. This is the group that is actually controlling all of the information, the doctrines that you're following. And these people have no education. These people, their education is service oriented. So there's no educational qualifications from any accredited school at all to become a governing body member. I want to move on to the next point that I want to make. So they all have to be a member of the anointed. This is interesting for me. I talked to a few people that are not Jehovah's Witnesses, and I use them because I think that their questions, including my partner, when they ask me questions, my mate talks about things, I try to use that as things that I want to make sure that I mention for all those who may come across my video. How do you determine that someone is of the anointed? There is no qualifications to determine that someone is of the anointed, only that they tell you that they're of the anointed. So the question is, well, what does it mean to be of the anointed? So they believe that they have been chosen to go to heaven. But there's no test. There's no like, okay, I'm thinking of a number from 1 to 10. What is that number? Or, okay, here's some water. Can you turn it to wine? Oh my God, you're of the anointed. That's wine. There's no test. So if these people who, go to the Kingdom Hall and they're like, you know what? I kind of want some recognition. I see what I need to do in order to actually, move up in the ranks and have some self-importance. So I think I've always known that I was going to go to heaven. I need to actually tell people that I'm of the anointed. And, you really aren't supposed to question people about that. But here's my point. If there's no real test, like perform a miracle, make somebody walk. If there's no test, then there's no way you can validate if someone is of the anointed or not. And so I want people to actually, if you get a chance, to watch my video about the mental illness in the Jehovah Witness cult. I'm not saying that every single person that says that they are of the anointed is mentally ill, but is there a psychiatric evaluation of anyone that makes the claim? Because you have to accept that there may in fact be a portion of people that say that they're of the anointed that may in fact be mentally ill and have some really gross delusions going on. So there's no test to be of the anointed. There's no educational requirement to be a governing body member. So you actually have people who just followed a script, got in with the right people, and were appointed. Now, how are they appointed? Is there, do people go to the Kingdom Hall and do they say, okay, so now we are going to talk about the next governing body member or the next governing body person that wants to become a member? Do people take a vote? Do you know anything really about the governing body other than you're supposed to unequivocally follow their direction? Do you know where they live? Do you know how much they're paid? And see, there's a problem with that. There's a problem with that because they're creating doctrine for the rest of the organization, and it's very harmful. So I want to do a comparison just to show you how other religions handle people that are their leaders. So as most people know, one of the number one people that the Jehovah Witnesses love to attack is the Catholic Church. So who leads the Catholic Church? So you have the Pope and you have the cardinals that lead the Catholic Church. So let's do a quick comparison. Again, because I studied world religion and I went back over some information that I had. And I think it would be very interesting to see the difference. So what are the qualifications to be the Pope? Or what is the qualifications to be cardinals? We're going to talk about both of those. To just compare to being a governing body member. So what have we established about the governing body? So the governing body has no formal education by any accredited college or school. It's not a requirement in order to do that. They self-proclaim to be of the anointed. However, there is no actual test to prove that you're of the anointed or not. You just wake up one day and say you've always known. So there's no test. The third thing is that you actually have to devote a lot of free labor. You have to go out and sell publications for the actual group, and then you actually have to go to sort of the headquarters of the group and do more free labor and more preaching, and then get in with the right people, and that's how you actually have the right people that select you. But it's very secretive and nobody actually is involved in it but maybe one or two people. So let's now talk about the Catholic Church. How do you become a cardinal? How do you become a pope? So the first thing that you have to do is you have to be a member of the Catholic Church. You have to participate, even before you graduate high school, you have to participate in the leadership programs that they have in order to move up, because you want to be a priest. So it's very clear that if you want to move forward and become a leader, that you're already talking about your interest in being in a priesthood, and that could be in high school, a little bit after high school. But then after that, if you decide that so you first need to graduate from high school. This is a requirement. And then you have to enter a seminary. So what is a seminary? And it is a college for for priests. It is accredited and it's a college that you have to attend. So if you look at the resumes of all the people that are cardinals or people that are actually a pope, you're going to see a long list of education that they've done at the undergraduate, graduate, and doctorate level. So these are people that have spent a lot of time, that have studied and had their degrees confirmed. So you get a master's. Most of them have a master's in divinity. So they're actually taking a lot of courses. Where I went to school, I actually went to school with people that were actually going to graduate from undergrad and then go on to become priests and enter a seminary. So people can actually go to any undergrad and then apply to a seminary and be a priest. But these are educational requirements. So you're actually studying the divine, you're studying the Bible, you're studying world religion. When I took graduate work in world religion, I actually took a class with a few people that were going to be nuns and being priests. So I mean, this is like so different from the Jehovah Witness cult, where they just want you to actually serve them and do free labor and actually work at Bethel. And what are you doing when you work at Bethel? You're not getting paid for it. It's volunteer service, so that the company, the corporation, can make money off of you, and that you can feel that you're being spiritual. And I'm not necessarily attacking the spiritual feeling that you have about yourself. What I'm saying is that there's nothing validating your knowledge, and there's nothing really separating you from someone else. So it's very important to see the distinction in other people and other groups that have leaders, because the governing body are leaders. Everyone is supposed to follow them without question. So let's pull the veil back a little bit and say, if they're supposed to be leaders, what qualifies them to be leaders? So in the Catholic Church, the qualification is that you graduate from high school, that you actually get an education, that you go to a specialized college in order for you to lead a group. That's a logical thing. Why would you want people to lead a group if they don't even have the specialized training to do so? So it's very important to actually make a distinction. So what happens after you graduate and you get, say, your master's in divinity? What happens next? So you have to actually be involved in your church. You have to be an active priest. You have to be involved in a lot of things that have to do with the community around you. So you have to have years of service, and it's different from the years of service that you have with the Jehovah Witnesses. The Jehovah Witnesses care more about you preaching and leading a group. They don't talk about benevolent or things for the community that have to do with people that aren't Jehovah Witnesses. Whereas in the Catholic Church, you're actually helping feed the poor. It doesn't matter if they're Catholic or not. You're actually being a charge of a commission where you're actually doing volunteer work for education. Jehovah Witnesses don't want you to be educated, because they feel like the less educated you are, the more that, they can control you. So after that, you get nominated to become a bishop when you're moving up the ranks in Catholicism. So you become a priest, you graduated from seminary school, and then you become a bishop. And a bishop is a priest at a diocese. And what is a diocese? A diocese is a territory or region that contains churches under a bishop's authority. So this actually makes sense. And in the Jehovah Witness religion, they have districts, they have regions, or that's kind of what my understanding was. It probably has changed, because they always have new light, and it's always some new light going on about what it is that they're actually doing. So then as you move up the ranks and you become a bishop, you can now do that, continue to serve your diocese, continue to show that you're devoted to your members and to your community at large. See, notice the difference a community at large. You're involved in things that have to do with your members in your community. Jehovah Witnesses don't care about the community unless you're a Jehovah Witness. So then you can now be elected. Notice the difference. A cardinal. Now, how are cardinals made? How were they done? The members actually have a voting process, and they actually are chosen. Do Jehovah Witnesses have anything to do with the members that go on to Bethel and actually become people that rule them? No, it's a very secretive thing. Like, you can't question them. You can't ask me questions. Like, how did you become a governing body member? Oh, excuse me, you have to have a judicial meeting. You sounding like an apostate. We're going to have to kick you out. You can get disfellowship. You can be labeled. You can lose track of your family simply for asking a question. Hey, how is it that these people are leading us unequivocally and we don't know anything about them? What is their education level? What makes them, how did they actually even get into the actual position? So compare that with the Catholic Church. The members actually vote on it. So the members vote on who becomes a cardinal. So bishop to cardinal, and the members actually help in the selection process. And again, since we're talking about the foundation of Jehovah Witnesses, they actually did those things. But once it became incorporated and there was a president and a board of director, those things stopped existing. And there was a big wall that was created in rank and file members versus what goes on in Bethel. Rank and file members, you can't even question elders. So you surely can't question people that are at Bethel. And you surely can't question any of the doctrine that the governing body says, even though, and you can watch my New Light video, how much have they changed doctrine over the years? How much new light have they had? And upon examination, they have no educational qualifications to be leading their members. So let's move on to the last part of my comparative analysis with the Catholic Church. And I'm not endorsing any religion, and I say that all the time. I'm actually just attacking this through logic and reason and truth. As a philosopher, and I've said this many times before, philosophy is like water. It doesn't matter the vessel that it's in. If it's in a cup, or if it's on a plate, or if it's on the floor, it's water. It's not going to change what it is. So the truth should not matter where you get it from. And so I'm saying, let's pull back the veil. Jehovah Witnesses love to attack the Catholic Church. I'm not endorsing the Catholic Church, and I'm not criticizing the Catholic Church. I'm just saying, okay, well, let's pull the veil back. So far, the cardinals need to be nominated by the members of the Catholic Church. The Jehovah Witnesses have nothing, the rank and file members have nothing to do with the people that lead them. All they know is that they can't question their leadership or they will be kicked out of the religion. And you tell me if that makes any sense to you. So then then the cardinals come together and they pick a pope when one passes away. And they have something called a conclave. So the cardinals, the bishop, there are people that are actually nominated. So once you become a cardinal, then that group of people actually, in a ceremony, in a group, nominate the pope. So this is all open. Anyone that wants to look it up, wants to question it, is free to do so. You can't do that in the Jehovah Witness cult. When people ask me, why is this considered a cult? Well, let's look at some of the things. You have unequivocal loyalty and obedience. You have a group of people that are unyielding, that you cannot question at all. And you must accept their authority. You're not allowed to have individual thought. A big shout out to the ExJW critical thinker. You're not allowed to have critical thinking. I say this all the time as an aside. There's so many great groups of people out there that make wonderful videos, like him and Mikey, ExJW, all of them. I don't get into the divisions that exist in the ExJW community because I don't agree with it. I feel like every person adds a different part of the enlightenment process, and we can all learn from each other. And I feel like us coming together and actually pulling the veil back and showing people the foundation of this group. And this is what this video is about. I want people to think about who is leading the Jehovah Witness group. You're not voted in. They say they have something, the anointment, but there's no test of that. It's just somebody self-proclaiming it. So someone self-proclaiming something that you can't validate through anything. And then these people get with the right people and they get selected in a secret selection. Because at one point there was 7 governing body members. Then one day they have a video and they have a press release that there's now an 8th member of the governing body. So you didn't get it. Did you vote on this 8th member? No, they just told you there was an 8th member. Did you find out anything about this person? Do you know anything about their education? Anything that they're doing? So how is it that you are following people that you have nothing to do with who they are? You just know that you're in a group that you have to follow no matter what. And that is the purpose of this video. So I've done my comparative analysis with the Catholic Church, and I want to end with why I was motivated to make this video. The danger of listening to unqualified people that may in fact have delusions of grandeur, people that you have no part in selecting to rule you. Even in a society, people have a voice in who rules them. That's called the voting process. But in this organization, in the Jehovah Witness cult, you as a member do not have any voice in who rules you. And you can't question it. So this 8th governing body member, you were just told in a press release. You didn't even know anything. And now you have to listen to these people as they create doctrine that can in fact change your life. The first doctrine, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I want every person that listens to this video to think about what it is that I'm saying. The blood doctrine. As I mentioned in another one of my videos, my stepbrother actually died because of the blood doctrine. They have changed this blood doctrine over the years. And with their changes, people have died. People have died trying to follow this doctrine. Again, look at my New Light video. I talked about it extensively. People that could have survived when they decided that they had a different idea about how you can now use blood expanders. People that could have survived died because they were following uneducated, unqualified governing body members who were making doctrine because they were stuck in a different age of understanding and reason. And it does not help, because you're actually killing people whether you know it or not, because they want to be a part of a religion because they don't want to lose contact with their families. So they're following this belief system. You're filling out cards. You have to give that, do not resuscitate me if I need blood, let me die. And then 10 years later, you're like, well, actually, you could have done this. So my number one criticism is the blood doctrine. And this next one is actually, it's a tie. The child abuse scandal. There are no words that will ever cover the amount of fury that I had when I saw a governing body member sit on the screen and say that I'm going to double down. And he didn't say I'm going to double down. He just said, we're never going to change our stand on the two witness rule. Now, I did a whole video on how my grandfather was a pedophile and a presiding overseer who raped my mother and aunts, but was never brought to justice because of the two witness rule. And my grandmother knew it. Any person as a Jehovah Witness knows of the two witness rule. They know that if they actually accuse someone of something, or they know that something's happened and there's no other witness, that they are actually in a situation where they in fact can be kicked out. They're encouraged not to be a part of the world. They're encouraged by the governing body not to trust the world, not to go to the authorities. How many times have they been sued? There's a whole database in every single Kingdom Hall where they actually have cases of child abuse. They refuse to turn that over to the authorities based on the words of the governing body. You see the actual connection here? The governing body is telling people, they're telling members of their congregation not to fight for child abuse victims, right? And this is sexual abuse too, because this is a sexist organization. But my point is simply this. There's a child abuse issue in the Jehovah Witness community. Why is it an issue? If you have people that are actually being abused in your organization, why would you listen to people who would tell you that you need all these different witnesses in order for something to be accurate, and they don't tell you go to the authorities? When you could actually go to the authorities, they can actually find DNA evidence without any witnesses, and someone can be charged, convicted, and sent to jail. I want people to think about that. Just think about that. The final thing that I want to talk about, and something that I find very, very dangerous, is following the governing body on predicting the end of the world. This is a reoccurring theme because people that listen to my videos that may not be Jehovah Witnesses, I want to be 100% clear. This is an apocalyptic cult. This is an apocalyptic cult where people have been trying to predict the end of the world. I was watching a video, and I can't remember where I saw it. It could have been Lloyd Evans. It could have been the ExJW. It could have been Kim and Mikey. My point is that I saw a video where they were talking about one of the governing body members that had made this video. So I was watching a video, and they actually had a clip from the JW org. And they were telling the members that we may ask you to do things that may not make sense to you, but you have to follow our authority without question. And the first thing that came to my mind was the Jim Jones cult. And I've talked about this before because I'm always like, what is their end game? Because they keep talking about the end of the world, and they use that fear tactic to keep people caught up in this cult. So how many times are they going to keep talking about Armageddon to fear people before you have multiple generations that have heard the same thing, and a bell's going to go off in somebody's head where they're going to say, you know what? And it's going to be a mass bell going off. Like we keep looking at things that have happened in the world and trying to connect it to the Armageddon's right around the corner, when there have been destructions of regions, there have been wars, there have been all kinds of hurricanes, tornadoes, entire villages, entire regions have been destroyed since the beginning of time. It's not new. But Jehovah Witnesses like to use that tactic to try to predict the end of the world. Like, the end of the world is coming. The end of the world is right around the corner. I've been hearing that since I was a kid, and it still hasn't happened. But what are they going to do when it's going to become abundantly clear that they really don't know what they're talking about? So they're going to either have to create a mass delusion like a Jim Jones, or they're going to do something to like, okay, all Jehovah's Witnesses come live on Warwick. And I'm just saying, when you talk to people who've been in cults and they've actually done mass, mass massacres, or they've had their leadership tell them to do something, it didn't start then. It starts with them actually making statements that you're already indoctrinated. You're taught to follow these people unequivocally, and then they start telling you, quit your job, leave your house. We have insight that Armageddon is happening this weekend. We need you to walk away from everything. And then they tell you, drink this Kool-Aid. I mean, this is what I'm telling people. Do not follow any group of people when it's talking about something that is detrimental. Use your logic. So I wanted to pull back the veil, and I wanted people to think about what it is that I'm talking about. When you have people that are instructing you, when they're telling you in these congregations to follow the words of the governing body without question, you have to ask yourself, what have they done to earn this? If you're a convert and you're going to the Jehovah Witness, religion, if you're going to the Kingdom Hall and you find out very quickly that the governing body are leaders, ask yourself the questions. What are their qualifications to be a leader? What is their education? And how do you validate them being anointed? And then I want people to wake up. See, governing body is not biblical. There was nothing in the Bible that said that you needed to be ruled by 7 or 8 members in an incorporated organization. So this is all things that they've created over time, and they've gotten it to the point that people are feared into following this leadership. And I'm gonna say it one more time. It's a dangerous example of cult leadership. There are too many examples in our past where people have followed a group of people or one person into their destruction. So think about what I said. And remember that it only takes one step to open the door to freedom of thinking. Thank you and have a wonderful day. I will talk with you very soon.